Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about UFC 280. UFC 280 happening in Abu Dhabi. The great Islam Makhachev takes out Charles Oliveira, buzzsawing through one of the people's champs, one of the great fighters in this era in combat sports. Charles Oliveira was on a run that was going to be legendary and is still somewhat, in that category. And for Islam Makhachev to take the baton of Khabib and his father and running with it, it's extending the legacy of the Nurmagomedov camp, extending the legacy of Khabib's father, like I mentioned, and to do it in a way which many people did not expect. And I'm going to talk about in this podcast why some people expected this fight to go a lot different and the reasonings behind it. And we'll chat about that a little bit more. But this card, UFC 280, the main and prelim event was spectacular. All culminating with Islam Makhachev taking on Charles Oliveira, obviously submitting him in the second round. We also got fights like Belal Muhammad, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. But for him to take out Sean Brady and the trash talking that was involved in that fight, talking about Philadelphia and how Sean Brady didn't take too well, with Belal Muhammad talking about his home city of Philadelphia. And for Belal to TKO Sean Brady, the streaking Sean Brady in the second round, the way he did, standing TKO, was not something that many people envisioned, who I believe Belal Muhammad was the underdog going into that fight. Beneil Dariush getting the amazing win in his fight against Gamrot. Again, another streaking fighter who has claims to fight for that lightweight belt. Piotr Yan losing to Sean O'Malley, and then Aljamain Sterling taking out TJ Dillashaw, who had the really unfortunate shoulder injury, and his arm was basically popping out of the socket. We're going to talk about those specific fights a little bit more. What can you say about Belal Muhammad? I mean, this welterweight fighter is taking on some of the greats and the champion. He took him, and unfortunately that one finished in a weird way with the eye pokes and all that kind of stuff. But he is calling all comers, and he is not scared to fight anybody in this division. And for him to get this massive, massive win and spending a lot of time in the Nurmagomedov camp with Islam Makhachev, obviously Khabib Nurmagomedov, the AKA crew, the family that has developed in that camp, spending a lot of time with them. It seems like some of those fruits have really, he's developed his game, and he has really, he was super aggressive in this fight against Sean Brady, which I did not expect when it came to this fight. In this fight, every moment, Belal Muhammad was really hunting Sean Brady, really taking the fight to him. At all points in the fight, you can notice that Sean Brady, most of the time, had his back against the cage, and Muhammad was circling the center of the octagon and stalking down Sean Brady. In the first round, at the end of it, you could see how aggressive he was in this fight. Beneil Dariush taking on Gamrot. I mean, what a fight that was. And to be honest with you, a little bit more of the reason why I wanted to talk about this fight was the unfortunate kind of situation that he's in now with Islam Makhachev. Now, his team, Habib including, want to call out the pound for pound great at the moment, Alex Volkanovski. And Beneil, now it looks like he has to go through another, loophole, another kind of like test where in his eyes and many people's eyes, we don't believe that he should go through another test, but it's just, what can you say when you have Islam Makhachev calling out Alexander Volkanovski and Alexander Volkanovski jumping into the cage and seeming like he really wants to take this fight on? And with Beneil's post-fight interview and the way that he was talking, it just didn't amp. And it's kind of sad to talk about it in this way, but it's not like it amped the rest. It's not like it ramped the crowd. It's not like it amped up the people watching on television. That he is deserving of, challenging for that lightweight belt. It didn't seem like that, especially for Beneil Dariush, and unfortunately for him, his name recognition isn't that high. So he really has to put it out there on why he believes he deserves that shot for that belt. Let's talk about Yan versus O'Malley, the bantamweight bout, which I think was the sleeper fight going into this card. O'Malley brought something to Yan, and Yan brought something to O'Malley that they both have not seen. The striking capabilities of Sean O'Malley and what he displayed in this fight was top class, was something that a title challenger should have, and he does. He deserves to be at the top of the bantamweight division. It was a big jump for him. What can you say? Petr Yan took on the fight. It's not really Sean O'Malley's fault that the matchmakers put this fight together and Yan took this fight. But what he showed was composure in this fight, not letting the big moment get to him. And it was honestly a real treat to watch. The way that Sean O'Malley dealt with this whole card, or with this whole card, and a lot of cameras on him. Everybody wanted to get an interview with Sean O'Malley. Now, I'll talk about the composure, I'll talk about everything, but at the end of the day, if you're gonna ask me who I scored this fight for, it was Petr Yan. And I think with the way that Sean O'Malley was talking after this fight, I'm not saying that he agrees with me, but I'm saying that he really wants to think about it. He wants to watch this fight over and over again, which he mentioned multiple times. And I think that maybe he should fight someone else. Maybe he should fight his former foe in Chito Vera, and take him on. But what a fun fight. Aside from it's a super close fight at the end of the day. And whoever you're going to call this fight for, it's not a major robbery for anybody. I'm just saying that I thought Petr won, especially with the couple takedowns that he got, especially with the takedown that he got at the end of the fight and secured that win in my eyes for himself. I'm a big Sean O'Malley fan. And this is not just me just kind of like trying to rag on the guy for no reason. It's just what I saw. And then let's talk about the bantamweight champion defending his title against TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw going into this fight and super injured. I mean, what can you say? The first takedown that Sterling got on TJ Dillashaw, TJ's arm literally popped out of his socket, a la, Aaron Pico in his fight. But in this one, it seemed a little bit more weird, where it so easily went back in. Ludwig was able to just pop it back in without even like with the Pico one, they really had to yank at it and let it reset in that way. It's like when you're playing basketball and you jam a finger and then you're pulling on it and trying to reset it. But the way that TJ Dillashaw and his team did, they just kind of massaged it back in, and it just so easily went back in, and it seemed like it was something that they've done multiple times. And then after the fight, TJ Dillashaw was talking about how many times, 20 or so times that had happened in camp. He wasn't at any of the open workouts. He wasn't, you know, hitting mitts in front of anybody. He didn't even hit mitts behind the scenes. I found it so weird that you go to those behind the scenes cameras between fights when the guys are about to just walk out, and TJ was doing the ball dodging training thing that a lot of fighters do, uh to perfect their evasive maneuvering and all that kind of stuff. But it's not something that I've seen that often, and I was like, that's kind of weird. And then obviously Aljo was, kept on talking about how nobody saw Dillashaw anywhere. Where is he? All this kind of stuff. And now we figured out what it was. TJ telling multiple people, including the referee, that, if this does happen to me, don't pull the fight, don't cancel the fight, and, have me leave in these terms. I can pop it back in and I'll be fine and all that kind of stuff. It sucks because it just puts another wrinkle on Aljamain's career as the bantamweight champion. Obviously, the post-fight interview did not help. The way that he was celebrating did not help. It just, it was a weird one. But hey, maybe he can get the fight against Henry Cejudo, who, is asking for this fight for such a long time, leaving the testing pool, now hopping back in. He needs 6 months to be able to fight in the UFC again. But that might be the fight that, makes Aljo the darling in many people's eyes, and we'll find that out. But a bunch of great fights. Great fights. Now let's talk about the main event. And before I talk about what happened in the fight, I want to talk about what we saw before going into this fight and how surprising it might have been for some people. So if we look at the matchup stats, we look at Islam Makhachev's 22-1. We look at the amount of fights that Charles Oliveira has had, 33-8. That you can see the difference between the experience that these two have had. Obviously, Islam has only lost once, and then Charles has tasted that defeat he's tasted it 8 times. But I mean, at the end of the day, look at the amount of fights that Charles has in comparison to Islam Makhachev. So I'm just trying to narrate the story of what we saw before we even entered the octagon at UFC 280. So, obviously, height is similar. All this kind of stuff is similar. Reach is similar. I just really wanted to focus in on that record there. Now, let's go into another big reason why people thought that this one would be a little bit more of like a back and forth battle. Let's look at Islam Makhachev's career. Fighting Bobby Green, taking him out KO, TKO, taking out Dan Hooker, Moises, and Drew Dober by submission. If you look at this, and now let's talk about Charles Oliveira's recent fights, taking out Justin Gaethje by submission, Poirier by submission, Chandler by TKO, Ferguson by decision. If you look at these 4 last fights in comparison to Islam Makhachev's last 4 fights, you would think, the caliber of competition that Charles is facing as opposed to Islam Makhachev, you think that it's a night and day difference. But what we need to remember is also the fact that um, a lot of people didn't want to fight Islam Makhachev. A lot of people, you know, were worried about that fight style against them, and again, Charles Oliveira has been fighting for so long. He has such he has a bunch more fights than Islam Makhachev. So this is one thing that we kind of thought of, and myself including, taking into, we're trying to take as much information as possible and spit out what we think might be the right answer. And what I'm trying to show here is that the record might not the record might not equal who's going to win. Meaning, we look at the, former title challengers, every single one of them, right? Um, Gaethje fought Habib, Poirier, um, has fought the best of the best in the lightweight division. Chandler fought for the belt against Charles Oliveira. That's how he got the belt. And, a bunch of, Tony Ferguson, what can you say about him? I mean, like the boogeyman of the division at one point, and I think Charles might have just spun him out and put him onto the trajectory that he's on right now. But just looking at the records, I thought that was an interesting thing going into this fight, and it might have, played a little bit with the narrative that we thought that this might have been a little bit more competitive. Now, I just wanted to go and pinpoint some stuff before these two gentlemen fought each other. So these are statistics before Islam and Charles fought. Let's look at Islam Makhachev's first. 57% striking accuracy, 65% takedown accuracy, 88% takedown defense, and then 2.27 strikes landed per minute. Okay. And let's look at this statistic with the little bit lower statistics of Charles Oliveira. Charles coming in with 53% striking accuracy, 40% takedown accuracy, right? In taking other people down. And then 57% takedown defense, okay, going against Islam Makhachev's stuff. And then 3.53 strikes landed per minute. And so what happened in the fight when they fought against each other? The stats are obviously there wasn't that many strikes thrown. And for Oliveira, he only threw 11 significant strikes. Makhachev only threw 18. So if we look at the striking percentages, Oliveira got 54% of his strikes in the first round, significant strikes. And then Makhachev got 66% of his significant strikes. Okay. It's not like it's relatively close. I mean, it's a really low number of strikes. The second round, 46% Oliveira got with this significant strikes, but then Makhachev got 78% of his significant strikes, getting a little bit, like pushing the pace a little bit more. Islam Makhachev did. But then the real thing that I think was different, and Islam kept on talking about it, and everybody in Nurmagomedov's camp talk about this, and they're really honest with what they plan on doing. They plan on taking people down, making them tired, and having them quit. Okay? And that's what Islam Makhachev, what he brought that was so different, but so ingrained in our minds from the Khabib Nurmagomedov era is, are you going to be able to stop these takedowns? Oliveira trying for one takedown, got nothing. Makhachev goes for 3 takedowns, gets 2. Okay. And that's, obviously this fight was finished by submission in the second round. And for Makhachev to keep on getting these submission, or, not just submissions, takedowns, and mauling people on the ground, That's the real difference maker. This chain wrestling that these Dagestanis are doing and relentlessly taking people to the ground is spectacular. I was chatting with a bunch of people about these fights, obviously, and from one point it looked like, Habib was in there. They're so, physically similar, and at one point I was like, oh, it looks like Habib's fighting again. And it's going to be the same question that we asked when Habib was fighting is, are you going to be able to stop these takedowns? And then what we really thought in this fight was, will the submission king be able to submit Islam Makhachev off of his back, right? Like, we all knew that Islam was going to take Oliveira down, but would Oliveira be able to submit Makhachev? And it was not the case. I mean, if you look at the way that Makhachev submitted Oliveira and was able to lock in that choke, and it looked like, it wasn't even fully put in there. And it looked like Charles was already ready to tap. Piecing him up on the feet, which I wanted to call out here, the second round, significant strikes, and then taking him to the ground and dominating him there. He buzzsawed through Oliveira. And it might have been an off night. Something might have gone on, but it was dominance, in my opinion. And what happened to Charles Oliveira is, I think, the tip of the iceberg. Now Islam Makhachev wants to fight against Volkanovski, calling him out. What a great moment. Volkanovski coming into the cage, old school UFC style, bringing people into the cage and having them talk like that. I think Daniel Cormier was the big matchmaker in that situation, and kudos to him for doing that. But what Islam Makhachev presented in this fight, because I wanted to show the past fights, which we talked about, what he showed in this fight specifically is that he's big time. He's ready for the moment. He's able to take down some of the best in the division by taking down Charles Oliveira. And it's not just the takedowns, it's the striking ability of Islam Makhachev that is different from his predecessor, Khabib Nurmagomedov. And what he's doing now is special. He's going to go on a run, I believe, for a while. And if you look at the lightweight division, who presents him the biggest test? Man, Beneil Dariush, maybe. But I think Beneil and Charles Oliveira are very similar. Some people are calling for them to fight. That would be interesting. But Volkanovski is the best we got to go against Makhachev. What a great set of fights. What a great night of fights. Afternoon of fights. UFC 280 was something that we're not going to forget for a while. The Nurmagomedov era has stopped for 2 years, and it is back in full force with Islam Makhachev leading the charge for this crew that is going through, especially the lightweight division. The way that they are is spectacular. The game planning, the balance that I see in the crew. I saw at one point Habib was going crazy, yelling at one of his fighters, and the way that everybody was able to balance each other out, I saw was spectacular. Calming each other down and all this kind of stuff. It's great to see. It just it makes you feel good. UFC 280 was a good one. What a fun card. Thank you for listening to this. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to it on YouTube or watching on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the bell notification, all that good stuff. If you're listening to it on the different podcast networks, please give 5 stars, give a comment over there, give a comment on YouTube. Let's talk about this kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. Bye.